This is a response video to a response video about Ernest Hemingway's writing advice. But I'm not going to talk much about Ernest Hemingway, I promise. Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to a video which I'm doing in response to a video that Matt Wall did in response to a video that I believe a channel called Book Fox did, in which Book Fox went over like 9 elements of writing that could be gleaned from Hemingway's writing advice or the way in which Hemingway wrote. And the Book Fox guy broke them all down one by one, and Matt went in and talked about where he disagreed with each one of those things and made some statements about art that I wanted to address. Now, first, you need to know there is absolutely zero hostility in this video, none whatsoever. I watch Matt's channel all the time. I love and appreciate his writing advice, his advice about publishing and creating art and doing all those things. Just because he and I might disagree on a few finer points here doesn't mean that there's any hostility aimed at him. He said his video would make people like Ernest Hemingway mad. I like Ernest Hemingway. His video didn't make me mad, but it did make me think. So, by the way, if you see me looking down, I have note cards. I want to make sure I covered all the points I wanted to cover. So that's why this is a little bit more scripted than normal. So first, let me deal with the Hemingway stuff right out of the gate. And let me just say, you should not be following anyone's writing advice 100% of the time. What you should do with writing advice is to listen to it, take in what you think works, maybe try it, and find out what works for you. Because one of the things I think is true about writing in general is that writing is a fairly idiosyncratic activity, that we all do it a little bit differently. We all do it with, some of us do it with music, some without, some write in pen, some in pencil, some just type, some dictate. The writing process is not something that you should be looking to imitate long term. Maybe short term, try it out so you can find out what works for you. So having said that, anything Hemingway said about this is the way to write and this is what's true of writing is, as Matt said in Matt Wall's kind of way, indicates that Hemingway was full of poop. Which is fair to say, and I think most writing advice is full of poop in some ways, no matter how well-intentioned it is. I'm not sure Hemingway's was all that well-intentioned. But I did want to make 2 points where just, my understanding of Hemingway's writing and my appreciation for Hemingway's writing did kind of rub up against a couple of things Matt said. So Matt made a big point frequently in his video of emphasizing that Hemingway's training was as a journalist, and that this probably did, impact his writing style. His famous penchant for short, declarative sentences that didn't rely on, huge words and those kind of things. I don't think there's any doubt that his background as a journalist influenced that. But to imply that that's all there is to Hemingway's style, as I think Matt does, I think overlooks some really important things about what Hemingway was doing. I've said this before, but I'll go ahead and say it again. Hemingway was a modern. He was creating a modern way of writing a story. All that stuff about, the iceberg method and all those kinds of things that he talks about are modernist in their construction. He is breaking away from traditional styles of writing. And it's not just that his sentences were short. It's not just they were objective. It's not just that they were, declarative or declarative. It's that he crafted those sentences, and this is something we're going to get back to have a certain effect, to imply things, to leave things out, and to kind of do that through repetition and sound and rhythm. So, to me, that's art. He created art in the way in which he wrote. You don't have to agree with me, but I'm going to read one of the most famous passages from Hemingway. It's the very first paragraph of A Farewell to Arms to kind of prove my point. In the late summer of that year, we lived in a house in a village that looked across the river and the plain to the mountains. In the bed of the river there were pebbles and boulders, dry and white in the sun, and the water was clear and awfully moving and blue in the channels. Troops went by the house and down the road, and the dust they raised powdered the leaves of the trees. The trunks of the trees were too dusty. The trunks of the trees, too, were dusty, and the leaves fell early that year, and we saw the troops marching along the road, and the dust rising, and leaves, stirred by the breeze, falling, and the soldiers marching, and afterward the road bare and white except for the leaves. So, to me, that's beautiful writing. I appreciate all kinds of different beautiful writing, but to me, that is an artfully created paragraph, which is intended to create an image connected to falling leaves and dust and dirt and things that are really white like bone and soldiers marching past, to give you kind of the atmosphere of people living in a time of war. And I think that's, you know, a brilliant introduction. So to me, there's more to it than just journalistic style writing. The second thing I'll take a little bit of issue with is Matt's frustration with Hemingway's advice or statement that if you could just write one true sentence, then you'd be able to go on. This is kind of how comes from a passage which Hemingway is dealing with or talking about writer's block or lack of confidence. And he basically says to himself, you've always written, you can still write. All you have to do is to write one true sentence. So what I think Hemingway means by one true sentence is one good sentence. One sentence that reflects the world, emotion, what you're trying to convey truly and without, you know, artifice or, as Hemingway might put it, BS. That write that one true sentence, and once you've done that, you can go on. This doesn't mean that Hemingway wrote his stories or his novels one sentence at a time, you know, far from it. But this was just a way then to regain confidence, to, you know, reassure himself that he would always be able to write, and that, you know, his talent or his skill, again, I'll get to that in a little bit, had not gone away, and that he would be able to write. And I kind of think that's really good advice. You know, and again, this will get to some of the difference between the way in which I think Matt and I look at writing, and therefore the way we look at art. But what Hemingway is suggesting here is that if you go ahead and write, and when you're reading back over your writing, you find that you've written a one really good sentence, one true sentence, then you know you can go on. Then you know that you should keep writing. Then you know that what you're doing, or that you can do the right thing. And so then the trick is just to keep doing the right thing. So none of that's what made me make this video. But, you know, I couldn't help but rise to the bait that Matt put out there in criticizing Hemingway's writing advice, which I think is perfectly valid. Like I said, I don't think you should be taking writing advice from anybody as absolute truth. But one of the things that Matt then talked about after that is he basically talked about the idea that Hemingway wasn't an artist. And the reason why he says Hemingway wasn't an artist is because Hemingway revised over and over and over again. That he was an obsessive reviser of his work. And that's true. He did revise his work quite a bit. And Matt, who is an artist and who has, I think, clearly an artistic temperament. I don't mean that in the way he's angry or misbehaves or anything like that, but just has that kind of feeling for art. I can see where he would think this about Hemingway, because what Matt said in the video is, if you're good at what you do it right the first time, and then you don't have to revise it. And then you don't need this long period of revision. And so from that, I think you can kind of see where Matt's idea about art is. And that Hemingway, through this constant process of revision, which Matt associates, I think, with a lack of confidence on his part, which is fine, I'm not arguing with him, that constant revision means that Hemingway wasn't an artist. At one point, he calls him a craftsman. And this is where I think Matt and I differ the most on writing, on what writing is. Is it an art or is it a craft? Now, to be honest with you, I think it's both. I suspect that Matt at some point thinks it's both. But Matt, I think, from what I could pick up on, believes that at some point the art itself takes over. And the craft, which you've learned and practiced, he's not saying you can go out and write perfectly the very first time with no need for revision. He's saying that you learn the craft, you learn the skill, and then the art takes over. You know, I think Matt seems to believe in a kind of a mystical quality to the process of creating art. He talks about the muse, and when the muse visits you, you need to take advantage of it and create art during that time period. Now, I would say that from my point of view, I don't necessarily make that big separation between a craftsman and artist. I think that writing is a craft, it's a skill that can be learned, that can be practiced well. And I've never been visited by the muse. I've written fiction, I've written poetry, I've written nonfiction. Not once has anything ever happened to me that I would consider being visited by the muse, or being in some ways, you know, inhabited by the muse of some whatever art I'm trying to create that would cause me to write. That just doesn't happen to me. But having said that, I don't doubt that that happens to Matt, and I don't doubt that that happens to, you know, other artists. One of the things I find most interesting about Matt's point of view on art is that historically he fits really well with kind of I think the beat generation, that generation of writers in the 1950s, Kerouac, who most famously, I believe Truman Capote said, that's not writing, that's typewriting, because it didn't seem to be edited, it seemed to go all over the place. Zelda, there is nothing out there. You just got bored and started barking. That beatnik time period coincides with abstract expressionism in American painting and action painting, like with Jackson Pollock. It coincides with the period of, cool jazz, in which improvisation and all those kind of things are really important. And I think there are artists who do exactly what Matt says. They just create. The muse takes over, they create. I mentioned Jackson Pollock. I think jazz musicians like Miles Davis or Thelonious Monk just were able to create on the spot, impromptu, improvisationally create. I think hip hop and rap artists can do that and have that happen with them. I just don't think that's what happens to everybody. I think for a lot of us, what we have is an idea for something, and we want to communicate that idea in the exact way we want. And maybe Matt's right, and we don't trust ourselves to just let that happen and to let the work go. But whatever it is, I kind of think about artists like, to use the abstract expressionist point of view or example. On the one hand, you have Jackson Pollock and the drip and the action paintings. On the other hand, you have Franz Kline creating abstract expressionism. But he clearly, if you ever look at one of his canvases, he's clearly painted over. He's clearly painted white over the black. Most of them are just kind of black shapes, lines, etc. of his paintings. But he's clearly painted the white areas as well. And so there is some revision in that. I think about Michelangelo's David and what a masterful work of art that is. And then I think about all those sculptures where Michelangelo, they say he didn't finish, and there appear to be like, sculptures of people trapped in the rock, but maybe he just thought it was going wrong. And so he stopped. Maybe he just had to revise his plan. And so he stopped. And so I think that, that line between craftsman and artist is probably that mystical, or that belief, or that actual mystical thing that might happen to people like Matt. And I don't ever expect it to happen to me, but that doesn't mean that I don't think craftsmen can't create art. I think craftsmen can create art. And I think, that Hemingway created art in his writing, just as I think Franz Kline created art. I think that, musicians and movie directors and poets create art, even if they go through the process of revision. And I'm not saying that Matt said that craftsmen can't create art. I think he does. I think he believes they can. I think he just believes that the highest function of art is when the muse takes over, and when you just create without thought to audience, without thought to revision, and then what is produced, if you've practiced enough, if you're skilled enough, if you're talented enough, what is produced is art, a finished work of art without the need for revision. Like I said, I doubt that I'll ever get there. I'm not sure that that's something I aspire to, but I did think it was really interesting. So, what I'd like for you to do is tell me, without any kind of attacks or, blaming somebody or saying somebody's wrong, just kind of share with me, do you think writing is an art? Do you think it's a craft or a skill? Do you think that craftsmen can create art, even if they don't have that artistic inspiration? Or do you think true art is only created by people following the muse and trusting their instincts and their skill to create something whole and complete all at once? Anyway, I look forward to your comments in the comments section below. I'll leave a link to Matt's video and to, I think, BookFox's video down below there as well, so you can see them. And, just kind of hoping to generate a friendly discussion between people who, I have a lot of respect for Matt, but we don't necessarily always agree. Anyway, look forward to your comments in the comment section below, and as always, thank you for watching.